stories.
Please don't kill me. I have a lot to live for. I have a wife and kids.
This particular story is the first of them, and will probably be quite lengthy because it took place over the span of a year. At the time, I was probably 8 or 9 years old, living with my mother in a small apartment, and my grandmother lived in the apartment below ours. We lived in the middle of a not-so-great town, but I loved being outdoors, and I had a lot of older male cousins who lived with my grandmother on and off. They would come out and keep an eye on me for the most part while my mother was busy. I don't remember a lot of the details, but it was summertime, and I went next door to my cousin Leah's house to play. They let us out to play alone for some reason, which I wasn't technically allowed to do because I figured I wasn't technically home, and that was a home rule. Kid logic, LOL. While we were in the alley behind our apartment, an older boy, probably around 15 or 16 years old, stumbled up to us, and I remember the immense smell of alcohol that radiated off of him. My little ass froze. The teenager starts wobbling back and forth and starts screaming in my face, "Where the fuck is my money? I told you I needed my motherfucking money back, you little bitch. I need my money." So this dude's screaming at a child some nonsense about this borrowed money, and I'm absolutely terrified, locked into one spot and crying. Leah comes to her senses and yanks me away by the arm, and we take off towards my grandmother's house, which was safer than her own, since there really wasn't much supervision on her parents' end. The whole time the boy just stood and stared as we ran. So we tumble in the back door crying and relive it to my family over and over again, till my cousins decide to scope out the area. He wasn't found, and I didn't have the best description in the first place. Being young and terrified, my mom even took me to a party up the alley where we had suspected he came from, but he was either hiding or had left, so I was unable to identify him. So the boys come out and watch us, and Leah ends up spending the night. Cut to bedtime, and we were in the bathroom brushing our teeth and goofing off. We had a tiny bathroom, so the toilet, sink, and window were pretty much crammed into one corner. Suddenly, someone starts screaming in my backyard. Because of the town and family I grew up in, we assumed it was a fight between my neighbors and my cousins, or just between my cousins. Both happened pretty frequently, but being the little gossips we were, we turned straight to the window and settled ourselves to watch. Only, it wasn't any of them. It was the drunk teenager from earlier, and he was waving something in his hand, still screaming about the non-existent borrowed money. When the light finally hit the object he had been brandishing, Leah screams, "He has a gun!" Immediately we drop to the ground, screaming and crying, and unable to form coherent sentences. My mom swoops in, shuts the blinds, and ushers us down to my grandmother's, where everyone erupts into chaos. The whole night was spent giving statements to the police, calling uncles, and generally just trying to calm Leah and I down because we are in absolute hysterics. He was never found, and life was finally normal. Till school started. My teachers and the principal were informed of the situation beforehand, but nothing prepared me for the day, mid-4th grade year, when I walked out of elementary school to find this boy and his friends sitting across the street where they weren't technically on school grounds. I tried to justify it. Maybe he had a little sibling or something. He was just hanging out. But I knew in my heart he wasn't waiting for me. I tried to walk home, but as soon as I would walk in one direction, him and the other group of teenagers would match it from across the street till I shifted directions again, and then they'd follow suit. Not even a block from the school, I made an executive decision to bolt back the way I came and tell a teacher. All hell broke loose again, and more police, but the kid was smart. When I ran, he'd taken off, as well, and he was again not found. My mom started picking me up and dropping me off to school after that, so things quieted down quite a bit. But there were still times in the couple-minute window I'd been standing alone when I would see him standing across the street just watching. The last incident, I never even connected to this situation until years later. He had stopped showing up at my school almost as abruptly as he had started. I eventually begged, pleaded, argued, and cried enough for my mom to start letting me walk home with Leah again. In hindsight, it was a really terrible idea, but I was a really spoiled kid. One afternoon, I split off from the group of kids Leah and I had been walking with and headed towards the apartment. Because it was an apartment building, the entrance was set up kind of oddly. The first door you entered basically just led to a second door, which then took you to a hallway where directly to the right was my grandmother's apartment door, and straight ahead was my mom and I's door. When I approached the entrance, I noticed the first door was open. Okay, whatever. It's not unusual for my cousins to have left it open, so I stepped in, took 2 steps forward, and went to open the second door. This door was open as well. Now, that was weird. I didn't know why at the time, but my grandmother used to be adamant about shutting the door because my older cousin smoked marijuana and she didn't want the neighbors to smell it and call the cops. I ignored it again and continued walking down the hallway when I reached my apartment door to find it standing wide open. My instincts finally kicked in, and I bolted. Nobody was at my grandmother's house at the time, so I had a neighbor go up and check the apartment out. No sign of forced entrance. Nothing was stolen. Nothing even rummaged through. I can't prove that it was him. Hell, we didn't even think he was an option back then, because he had finally left me alone. But only my mother and myself had keys, and if it would have been my cousins breaking in, they would have stolen anything of value to feed their addictions. The door had been closed and locked up until the point of my grandmother leaving, so it wasn't an accident. I forgot the lock the door scenario. But in any case, guy who stalked me during elementary school, let's not meet again. This story still gives me chills, and I haven't spoken of it in a while. This is a long story and needs extensive backstory, so please bear with me. So flash forward to high school. I wasn't the most social guy in school. I had my really close friends, but other than that I would classify myself as a loner. I had really bad acne, which affected me a lot when meeting new people, and I was very addicted to World of Warcraft. So it was a Friday night, classic raid night, in vanilla World of Warcraft. About 2 hours before the raid, my best friend that I grew up with, let's call him T, called me. He's like, "Yo bro, I'm meeting up with 2 women later tonight. Let's drink and hang out with these women." It was one of those classic fork in the road moments. Be a nerd and blow another Friday night playing a video game, or go out with my best friend and see if I can finally lose my virginity. Before I get to the next part of the story, I need to give some backstory on T. T was nothing short of a boss, and I truly looked up to him. He is a really good-looking guy, and is extremely intelligent. I'm not understating this. He's the type of guy, when he walks into a room, all the women just gravitate towards him. But T has a dark side. Even though he has everything going on for him, it was never good enough. He got expelled from the school we both went to for having a couple grams of marijuana, aka just trying to flex, and got caught by a teacher. So he was sent to another school about 30 minutes away from me. Nothing changed, and it actually got far, far worse. He became the guy. He started fucking all the hot chicks and became a massive drug dealer. He supplied about 4 or 5 high schools and colleges in the area, and was for sure on the radar of the law and other rivals. So after playing mental ping pong for about 30 minutes weighing out all the options, potentially get laid, drunk, or nerded up like usual, I finally said fuck it, count me in for tonight, T. I bribed my brother $20, and he agrees to raid for me, and the night begins. T picks me up from my place and greets me with a big smile and says, "We're getting laid tonight, brother." I'm like, "Whatever, bro. We'll see." I'm very used to T over-exaggerating, so I quickly asked, "When are we meeting up with these women?" It's about 9:30 p.m. at this point. Under his breath, he says, "Around 1 a.m. I'm like, what the fuck are we supposed to do for 3.5 fucking hours? T pulls out a bottle of Bacardi 151 with the metal grate and passes it to me. Thankfully, I had been drinking hard that year, so my tolerance was decent. We head to this awesome park to burn time and start passing the bottle back and forth. We catch up on life, and we're about 6 out of 10 drunk at this point. It's around 11:30ish. So, with an hour and a half still to burn before we are supposed to meet up with said women, T says, "Let's roll to Taco Bell. We can get some food and sober up." At this point, I'm drunk, and we have some time to burn. So what the hell, let's head to Taco Bell. As most degenerates know, Taco Bell is open late, and the one we went to is located in a shopping center. No surprise, around 12 a.m., there are no cars whatsoever in the parking lot, except for the workers of Taco Bell. T rolls up to buy his food, and we just sit outside the parking lot of Taco Bell while he eats. While T is eating, I snag a cigarette and get some fresh air. As I puff away on a Marlboro Light, a white van rolls up with tinted windows with no license plate. The van parks to the west of our car about 50 feet away in this empty parking lot. The lights outside and inside the van instantly turn on and off and no one gets out. I keep smoking, but I don't think much of it. I mean, we're essentially doing the same thing, but a car with no license plate was obviously weird. I get back into T's car and I start getting a really uneasy feeling about this van. At this point, I have sobered up a little bit, and I just keep eyeing down this van. Something doesn't feel right. It chose to park 3/4 of the way into this parking lot with a perfect view of our car. I turn to T and tell him it's time to leave. This is where the backstory comes into play. As I mentioned, T is very deep into this point and was at the height of his drug dealing career. So that exact thought was in the back of my mind when this van was parked inconspicuously. This next part is not exaggerated in the slightest. T turns on his headlights to his car to leave, and I shit you not, I almost instantly, after our lights are on, the white van turns their lights on. My stomach dropped to the floor at this point. We are both freaking out. T knows he could be busted by the police at any point, and that's not even considering all his rivals and people he's fucked over. So right when we see the light turn on from the van, we turn ours off. And no fucking joke, the van turns their lights off to mimic our reaction. T reaches to the back seat of his car and pulls out a backpack with a weapon in it. I can't believe this is actually going down. At this point, I'm inching on crying. This is obviously no coincidence. We were followed to this shopping center. We sat paralyzed in fear and dripping in sweat for the next 10 minutes, waiting to see if the van would move. It did not. T starts mumbling to himself. This might be a goon squad that was hired to hunt me down. I'm speechless to that comment. I was a normally unsocial kid who loved sports and video games, and now I'm in this terrible and possibly life-threatening situation. At this point, I really wish I had just stayed home and played World of Warcraft. No potential sex is worth the heart attack I'm currently going through. I felt extremely nauseous, and I'm soon close to throwing up. Is this actually happening, or am I dreaming? This doesn't feel like the police. they wouldn't go through this type of charade. They would turn on their lights and arrest us by now. I can't stand this demented showdown we are currently in. I'm on the verge of a mental breakdown and tears are rolling down my face. I turn to T and tell him to turn on his lights one more time. Almost like clockwork, the van flicks on their lights. But this time was very different. I was able to see multiple shadows of hooded men in the van. I turn to T and tell him to fucking book it out of here. I've never seen someone go 0 to 60 out of a shopping center before, but you can bet your ass we did. T turns his headlights on while exiting the shopping center and sees the van following us. We start cutting down side roads for the next 5 minutes. Thankfully, no one is following us anymore. At this point, I'm just staring at T and ask, "What the fuck was that, bro?" T says with a weak voice, "I have no idea other than what you know. What I do, drug dealing." We take a deep breath. We hit the bottle some more. The next 20 minutes we sat in silence and came to grips with almost being involved in a sting operation, robbed by rivals, or even worse. Once my heart rate dropped back to normal, we finally headed out to meet the women. T and I never spoke of that moment ever again, and to this day, the thought of that night still chills me to the core. Scary men in the white van. Let's not cross paths ever again. If you are new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.